Good morning. We are continuing our devotional. This is Erica Walters with Launching Legacies. We're continuing our devotional on the process of growing and maturing in our faith, right? So when we started this devotional, we were talking about, for me, the journey of the last year, 2015, and how 2015, 2016 set me up for this exponential growth in faith. And now we're looking at what it was like step by step as I grew in this new level of faith, this maturity of faith, and how that worked. And so today we're going to talk about growing in the secret place, because faith growth is not necessarily a publicly identified thing. It's more of a private process that happens for us. And so here we are going to look back at the story that I discussed in our last devotional, which was called Common Pains, right? We're going to look back at that, and we're going to look at Genesis, but we're going to start in Genesis, the first chapter, because let me explain what happened with me. So I got to the point that I talked about last week, in which I realized that it was going to be hard for me to abandon this concept of getting feedback from other people. It was going to be hard for me to abandon these resources and this repertoire that I had been so used to going back to, right? And that's what I had relied on. I called it faith, but it was more about this process of relying on what I knew and what I was connected to and how I had already been living the context of my life. And so when I abandoned those resources, those people, that insight, that information, and realized that it would be painful, but it would be better for me to rely only on God, then I had to do something different with God. I had to see God in another way. And so I went back to Genesis, right? So when Genesis 1, we see that the creation of the world is formed. And at the end of Genesis 1, what's also happening is the creation of man. And so when we see Adam created here, he is created and shaped and formed in private. It's just him and God. God is taking him from the dirt, and he's molding him, he's shaping him, he's making Adam who he wants him to be. And so then I move forward and I see the creation of Eve. And interestingly, even though Adam exists, we see Adam exists from the chapter 1, when Eve is created, she's also created secretly and privately. And so what do I mean by that? I mean that Adam is put to sleep, right? He's put into a deep sleep, and he has no input, no insight. He's not observer. He's not, looking at from one of those medical studios from the top, looking down and watching God do this. He's not doing any of that type of things, right? He's not giving insight. God doesn't say to Adam, "Hey, Adam, this is going to be your wife. What do you think? Should her nose be big here? What should it be?" God didn't do that, right? When he was shaping Eve, he didn't say, now tell me, do you want her to be tall or short? Because, I want this to be the best mate for you. So how do you think her temperament should be? Should she be this way or that way? He didn't have any input in that. God created Eve by himself, and it was just he and Eve in the creation process. And so I thought about that. And then I went to a verse that's very, very dear to my heart. It's actually a chapter, Psalm 139. And we find out the same thing that the author says there. He says that we were created in secret, right? And we commune with God. And so I encourage you to read Psalm 139 and get the depth of what is being said in that passage. But it's a reflection of what's happening in Genesis 1 with Adam and Genesis 2 with Eve. And then Psalm 139 says it, then Jeremiah 1 says it, and so on and so forth. We find these references throughout scriptures, these little nuggets of all these places where we find that God is creating man. He's creating people, but he's creating them in secret, with him knowing exactly what he intends, with him knowing exactly what he wants, with him knowing exactly the outcome, and it's only him. And so I look at this in the process of what we're doing now, right? Common day. We have children now, common day, right? And what happens with the pregnancy process? The baby is shaped and formed in the uterus, right? In utero, and the baby is growing and developing, and that's how we know a person is pregnant, right? Because their stomach grows, and we can see that the baby must be growing in their womb. Well, in this time that the baby is growing in the womb, we don't get to see that baby. We don't get to give feedback to God, right? We don't get to say, oh, I want my baby to be really tall. Could you give him the tall stuff? Or I want my baby to be this complexion. Or I want my baby to have this color hair. Or I want my baby to have this color eyes. And I want to do all this type of stuff. We don't get to do all of that. Now, I know some of you are thinking, yeah, with this new science and modern science, but even modern science hasn't gotten to the place of being able to do all of the details of actually designing what your baby will look like from beginning to end. They're not quite there. Now, they may be trying, but that doesn't mean that they're supposed to be trying either. So let's go back to the concept of what happens to us in creation. We get to have the experience of birthing a child and then seeing for the first time what God did, what he created. When Adam woke up from his deep sleep, he got to wake up and see for the first time what God did in secret. Right? And so every time God is creating man, he's creating man, even to today, in secret, without anybody else having knowledge of what's happening, without anybody else being able to see it. And that's what God took me back to. After I realized that I needed to abandon what I've been relying on, then I had to go back to God and see him differently. And from creation, I had to see him differently. And that's what this is dedicated for, is that I had to grow in my faith secretly, like I was created secretly. That's right. So I had to learn, in abandoning everything else, and abandoning everybody else's opinion, and abandoning what been the norm to do, or what would have been the regular practice to take. I abandoned all that, and then I had to go back and recognize that God had created me in a secret place, and it was in that secret place that he was going to increase my growth in my faith in him, mature my faith in him, because you see, in that place is where he put in me what he had destined me to do. And we see that in Jeremiah 1 in particular. Jeremiah is complaining, right? He's saying, in Jeremiah 1, he's saying, he finds out he's supposed to be called to do this great work. And he says, oh, I'm too young. They're not going to receive me. I'm too young. I can't do it. I can't do it. And God says to Jeremiah, listen, Jeremiah, and he's very straightforward with Jeremiah. He says, listen, Jeremiah, you're going to do it because I created you before this world was shaped and formed. I put you on this planet to do this work. You will be a prophet because I made you to be a prophet. But see, where did he make Jeremiah to be a prophet? In the secret place. And Jeremiah's pushback was an example of the common pains I talked about last time. The common pains are just say, oh, I looked at them and they're this age. And oh, I looked at them and they're this age. And oh, I looked at them and they were doing this when they were doing that. And oh, I don't know. And so I'm comparing myself, and comparatively, I'm too young to do this work. And God is like, stop comparing yourself, right? He said the same thing to me that he said to Jeremiah. He said, look, stop comparing yourself. You don't know what I'm about to do, because you haven't revisited the place where I created you. And I created you in secrets. So no person will be a reference for where I'm going to take you. And no person can be a reference for where and who you are. I am your reference because I am your creator. And so this growth becomes a secret place between you and God. No longer relying on the last, but even more than not relying on the other stuff that I talked about yesterday. What's difficult is for us to let go of other people. But no, even deeper than letting go, now that we finally get to let go of that place, now we have to go back and embrace creation all over again. We go back and we look at creation all over again, and we hold creation in our hands again. This concept that we were made in secret and that no one had any part to it, and that God that gingerly and meticulously made us good, because everything that God makes is good. Everything that he creates is good. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's not far from the idea, from the concept of who we are. He knows us. And so he's saying, look, what he said to me in the beginning of my journey launching legacies was this. Look, if you get back to the secret place, you won't be so afraid or worried about these other places. Right? If you get back to the secret place, the pain that you know to be common to man of being able to let go of what other people are doing and holding on, or let go of your own past knowledge. If you get to that secret place, those ideas and those places of reference will seem insignificant because you'll know who made you. And knowing who made you is super important, because that's what's going to feed you, and that's what's going to make you well. And that's what's going to make you whole, knowing me as your creator. So I'm going to invite you to go into the secret place of growth. right? The secret place of growth. Revisit these chapters. Genesis, the first chapter I reference. Genesis, the second chapter I reference. Psalm 139 I reference. Jeremiah chapter 1 I reference. If you go back to those places and you think of these people that are being discussed as you, put yourself in the light of the scripture and see what God is saying about how he created you. Because truly there is no difference. He's doing the same thing now that he was doing then. Every new person he creates in secret. We don't get to know about it. We don't get to give our insight into it. We don't get to decide. He's the decider because he's the creator. And your creator wants to grow with you, or wants you to grow with him more so, in the maturity of your faith. And that happens in the secret place. So be blessed. I'm going to be praying for you. And I encourage you, like I said, to read those scriptures, but to continue to watch these devotionals and watch us go through the progression of what it means to mature in your faith and what that process was like, particularly for me. I'm giving a testimony as I'm talking about the scriptures, but what that's like. And I encourage you and I bless you that you're going through the same process on your own. So have a wonderful day. Be blessed. We'll see you tomorrow.